Do you know someone who has issues with people because of the color of their skin? Do you often spend your days thinking that you don't like a person and you wish they were something different? Are you married to someone of a different group and you seem to look at your children differently because of how they look? Today, that's what we're going to talk about. How does God really view all the different races? You know, we sit back and we often think that God only designed one person. And if you go back into history, you'll find out that it is common thought that God designed the European race to be the dominant race. But God does not share that philosophy. So today we're going to go to 1 John 4 and 20. And here's what he says. If a man say, I love God, and hateth his brother, whom he can see, he can't love God, whom he can't see. Period. End of subject. If you hate your brother, then you are on the wrong side of God. And that's plain and simple. Today, we're going to have some real talk because in the US, I'm watching this thing happen with these politics again. And it just cracks me up when I listen to these people profess to be of the Lord. And then they turn around and they do these things that are so far out of left field and nothing that God would ever support. And people rile behind them. Yeah, but it's that hatred that's in your heart that's keeping you separate from the man that you say you love. There are so many churches out here that people go to, and these churches hate people. Well, we don't want this person in our church. Then you don't run a church, you run a social club. And when you realize that you run a social club, you can finally get to the point where you stop thinking you are all that in a bag of chips. That's called self righteousness. And that's not someone who needs Jesus. Self righteous people think that they are better. And because of that thought process, the things of God escape them, they elude them. Why? Because they can't get out of their own way long enough to understand that Jesus came for everyone, including the people you don't like. You see, Jesus is a powerhouse. And with everything he has, he can create and destroy at any point in time. The Bible specifically says to you, on that day, there are people who will come to me and say, we cast out demons in your name. We did this in your name. We did that in your name. And he'll say, depart from me. I knew you not. You see, that is not someone who accepts everyone. So while you sit back and you say God loves everybody and you show hate to so many people, you walk into a store and you treat a waiter or a waitress or someone who's working behind the counter with any level of disrespect, that is you hating on your brother. You see, the standards of God are far greater and far higher than what we have here on this earth. The number of times that people go into a restaurant and don't even bother to look at their server is unbelievable. This is the person who's bringing you their food, your food. Don't you think you might want to have an interaction with them? How about you give them a reason not to put something in your food? And while most waiters or waitresses would never ever do that, there are some who get so offended by being disregarded like they're nothing. There's not a person walking the face of this planet that does not have value. To sit back and say that you love God and then to go out and preach against it, to kill abortion doctors, to kill people having abortions, makes you far worse than they ever were. Your sin is greater than what the doctor did or what the person having the abortion did. I want you to understand something. When you talk about politics, You've really got to understand what politics are. They're nothing more than a crazed psycho social club. That's all they are. The right, left, up, down, it doesn't matter what side you stand for. Man does not have the authority to be in control over man. However, because we have taken that control, because we have structured our world the way that we have, we get laws that are not good for us. That just is what it is. There's no such thing as a politician who's going to be able to deliver on every promise because he's surrounded by a group of people who choose to make his life hard. If the president is Republican, then the Democrats make his life hard. If the president is Democrat, then the Republicans make the life hard. I mean, it's ridiculous. The games that they play with people's lives. And here's the funny thing. You go to the polls every year to elect these people who are going to play with your lives. And instead of looking at it rationally and reasonably, you get caught up in some kind of funky emotion. Here's the thing. When you serve Jesus, there's one thing you understand. You have a king. You have a leader, and his name is Jesus the Christ. You honor the people and the position that they hold on this earth, but you remember who you serve. Donald Trump, to forget who that man was and is, that's a problem. This is a man who, while he was president, decided he was going to take a picture in front of a church with an upside down Bible and left a white man on the ground with blood pouring out of his head. Well, he shouldn't have been protesting. People were dying and they were protesting peacefully. That's a constitutional right you have. That right doesn't change because you don't like what they're fighting for. You see, this is also the same man who, when 5 young men were falsely accused of committing a heinous crime in a park, he publicly came out and said that they needed to be annihilated, they needed to be killed. First off, that judgment he did not have the authority to make. At best, he was a celebrity because he hung out with celebrities, not because he accomplished anything. You have to understand something that most of you don't remember about Donald Trump. Donald Trump has any finances that he has because of the women he's married to, not because of him. He doesn't know how to manage money. He spends more money than he makes. That's a guarantee. Melania is not a fool. She has a son, and she's going to make sure that her son gets everything he has coming to him. Ivana was not a whole lot different. In fact, if you will go back into YouTube and search out his divorce from Ivana, he was ruthless enough to sit back and say being married to Ivana was like being in a boardroom. Well, I guess it would be when you're 12 and you don't know how to handle your business. And this is the person you look to and you support, and then you have the audacity to compare him to a man who was sinless? Are you kidding me right now? Seriously. Because when you call out Jesus, that name never, ever, ever needs to be in the same sentence. The fact of the matter is that you're calling out a man who has nothing but hatred in his heart. How many people have had money completely gaffled from their account? They go and donate $300 one time, and every month somebody's taking $3,000 out of their account? That's 10 times what they pledged one time. How do you compare that to Jesus? You see, when people tell us something, we tend to believe them. And let's not just pick on Donald Trump, because Barack Obama wrote a book and people came to me and said, oh, he wrote a book about himself. I love Barack Obama. Who is he? No one knew. Now, the one thing I will never ever I will never ever argue with these guys with anybody about or disagree with is that he and his wife have a dynamic marriage. And for anything, you've got to respect them for that because too many of you know exactly how hard it is to make marriage work, and those two do it really, really well. And that they not only love each other, they like each other. And that's the key. So, let's go back. What does this have to do with hating God? I can't put a person in the place of Jesus and think that I love him. It doesn't work. I don't have to like a politician. I don't have to love a politician. Ron DeSantis started off really well not too long ago in a press conference he did about squatters. He was like, absolutely not in the state of Florida will a squatter have house rights. He could have left it right there and changed the entire thought process around who he is. But he didn't. Instead, what he did was he started calling out different races of people who do it, but he doesn't have the statistics or the facts. It is not people of color who do the most squatting. You see, when you want to divide everything based on race, you're dividing based on hate. There's bad people in every group. It doesn't matter what they look like. It doesn't matter what color skin they have. It doesn't matter how long their hair is. None of that matters. There are bad people in every single group. How about you deal with the fact that there are bad people? And that sometimes, in the midst of those bad people doing what they choose to do, those who choose not to live an evil life get hurt. That's just a fact. But that doesn't weigh against God. That's people. Humanity is nasty. And when they choose to live a life of self-absorption and their focus is themselves, they don't care about you. So anything you struggle with, they're not going to care because they don't care about you. They care about them. So I'm going to make your night really hard tonight because I want you to understand something. Adam and Eve were not two people of the same race. They were two different colored people because God doesn't have issue with color. And the reason that we know that is because when you mix people of different backgrounds together, they still produce children. And those children can have more children. Color is a human issue. It's not a God issue. How do we know? Well, here's your answer. One group of people cannot produce every color. You have to have two different colored humans to make sure that you produce every level of melanin that's out there. And that's how it works. Real science knows that. So scientists or so-called scientists who like to say that they can prove that there is a lesser anything because of somebody's skin color, yeah, that's not a scientist, that's a make-believer. It's make-believe. Because that's not how God operates. So while you sit back and you think about Jesus and who he is, learn to be real and honest about him. Understand that the Bible testifies to itself, and it does so very clearly, and that a misunderstanding of the Bible is based on the individual, not the Bible. So let's use one more example. Be not unequally yoked with non-believers. That does not talk about being with people of different races. But the fact of the matter is that that's exactly what that was used for. It was used to prevent what was called misogyny of the races, and that's called race mixing. And it's so funny how that works because, again, that's not what that verse was about. It was about when you get together with a person, when a male and female come together, When a female and a male come together, they cannot be of a different faith. That's what that was talking about. And he wasn't talking about Episcopalian and Catholic and no, it's very simple because remember in God's world everything is black and white. It's right, it's wrong, it's black, it's white, it's day, it's night. You serve Jesus or you don't. Period, end of subject. What he was referring to was the serving of Christ, following and accepting that Christ is the truth, the way, and the light. And no one comes to the Father except through him. If you two don't agree on that basic principle, you have nothing to stand on because you've got one part of your foundation built on sand and the other part built on rock. And for those of you going through this right now, let me make something very clear to you. You are not going to convert them. Most of you will be converted to their side and not them to yours. There is a strength that it requires, and it is not a human strength to be able to stand in a relationship where one of you is a servant and the other one of you is not. Because when you have that type of relationship, there is a toxicity that takes place that is so unbelievably destructive. And I want to tell you about a young man that I know who professed to be of the Christian faith, that he was a follower of Jesus. He married this beast of a woman. She is a corrupted woman, and we will talk about that in a video as we deal with our fear and the foundations and all that other stuff. But this woman was atrocious. She has pulled him from his faith into no faith. And now he is easily manipulated. She gets what she wants, and he's dying. And that's what happens. Most people do not have the physiological strength, the emotional strength, the psychological strength to withstand the beatings that come your way when you are in that type of relationship. If Jesus doesn't walk in and hold you, and believe me when I tell you, he will warn you this is not the person for you. Heed that warning because it's always worse than you imagine it to be. That's what that verse means. Do not be unequally yoked with people who do not serve Christ if you are a servant. Conversely, if you are not a servant, go hook yourself up with somebody who's in the world. You guys will have things in common and you might be able to make your relationship work, provided that you get out of your own way and you stop thinking that you're all that and a bag of chips. And that's how it works. But insofar as how we feel about each other, there's never a reason for us to hate each other. There are going to be people we don't like. I'm sorry to tell you, there were people Jesus didn't like too. There are people God doesn't like. And if you think that that's mistaken, perhaps you might be reading a book that's different from mine because God very clearly says, I hated Esau. Esau have I hated. I'm not thinking he was the only one. But you have to read it to go see for yourself. Because the one thing I want you to understand is that listening to somebody tell you what's in the Bible and not going and studying it for yourself, that's a problem. Yeah. You've got to understand that you were designed by God with a purpose. There is not one person on this earth that God did not make. Not one. He might have started an automated process, but each of you got his breath of life or you're not here. You have to understand that hate does one thing and one thing only. It destroys you. If I sit here and drink strychnine, it's not going to kill the person I hate. It's going to kill me. And that's what hate does. You know, I watch, especially here in the US and times in the UK, where there's just this insane level of animosity between groups of people. So here's the irony. God set us all up to win. Don't you realize that it's man who sets you up for failure? Not God. Man stands in your way. They teach you how to stand in your way. They have entire systems in place that teach you how to stand in your way, and you accept it. But let some girl down the street talk badly about you, and now you want to get into a fight. You're fighting for the wrong thing. Don't you understand that the reason they're stirring up that level of fight isn't because it's going to bring you closer? It's because everything in this world is bringing division. This is what's happening right now. The more we can divide you, the more control we have over you. Is that what you're trying to do? Is to live a life where you're controlled? Is that what you want? To be under somebody's delusional control instead of dealing with your own life? You have the power to be whatever and whomever you want to be. You have the ability and the gifts, and the earth was designed for you to always be a success. So when you think you're not successful, the first place you got to look is you. What choices are you making? God told us, hey, listen, I'm giving you 2 rules. Love me with everything you have, and love your neighbor as yourself. Those are the 2 rules. He then follows it up with, but by the way, if you don't love your neighbor who's right in front of you, then you can't love me who you can't see. So if you choose not to love your neighbor, guess what? You also choose not to love God. And there are a lot of you who will walk away from Jesus because somebody is bad. Well, I hate to tell you this. People are ridiculous. They make bad choices. That's a reality. It's a fact. Can you let it go? I mean, really, why would you slit your own throat because somebody made you angry? That's the dumbest thing in the world. Oh, I'm going to go in the grocery store. The guy treated me badly. I think I'll slit my wrist. Does that make any sense to you at all? That's not something that most people would do. And the reason you wouldn't do it is because it doesn't make sense. That person was a jerk or they were having a bad day. It's no different with a father. Not that he's having a bad day, but when someone says that they represent him and then they do something that you don't like, you gonna hold that against him? That's the same thing as slitting your wrist because somebody was mean to you at the store. So let me teach you how to handle this. When someone's mean to you, you put a smile on your face and you say, you know what? I hope your day gets better. And I really hope that you have a wonderful evening. And sometimes they're going to be like, I'm having a great day. You know they are lying through their teeth. You keep that smile on your face and you keep stepping because that's how you start making a better life for yourself. It teaches you how to turn the other cheek, how to let people be. Because when we walk with Christ, we are steadfast. And that steadfastness is the thing that shows people who we are and who we serve. If you walk around with a cross on your neck, but you don't treat all people with the same level of respect, the same level of excitement, you have the issue, not the world. And the reason we're seeing so much nastiness in this world today is because people are walking around and allowing that poison to enter their system. You got to be willing to let it go. You have to understand that that's not what you were designed for. People are going to have bad days. You don't have to join them. I got to go. I'll see you next Friday.